All right, we'll give it a few minutes as people come into either the Zoom or the YouTube system. Oh, didn't mean to click. Hope that everyone has been doing well and coping fine with if you are logging in through the YouTube, please go ahead and just say hi through the YouTube chat. If you're coming in on my screen, so I know you're. Good evening, Rabbi. As always, when we're going through the different parts of the class, please feel free to pipe up, ask questions, make comments. You can either do that through Zoom, or you can actually use your voice. I do like the sound of human beings, and I like being able to see them as well. So all of those are options. All right, a few more people logged in through Zoom. That's great. Since I do happen to have a 7 o'clock meeting, we are going to go ahead and get things rolling. So if you are an avid watcher of the Jewish calendar, you may have noticed that we have moved into a special time of year. Is the prelude to the day of commemoration known as Tisha B'Av. And tonight we're going to be discussing what this special day is in Jewish history and how we commemorate it, along with all of the other fast days that are connected to it, of their own unique character. But we're going to just focus on the ones that are part of the calendar that sort of circle, that orbit the day of Tisha B'Av. With that in mind, days, and they have a number of different titles. Unfortunately, like many things in Hebrew, translating them is often very less romantic than hearing them in the Hebrew. But I'm going to walk you through the timeline, and we'll be going in order of the events rather than in order of the calendar. So we begin with the 10th of Tibbitt, also known as Asara B'Tibbitt, which means the 10th of the Hebrew month of Tibbitt. The month of Tibbitt usually comes in December or January, usually. Siege of Jerusalem by the Babylonians in 586. As you're going to begin to realize, the dates that are commemorated through this cycle all are primarily associated with the assault and they also have secondary commemorative meaning as well. Case in point, if we look at the 17th of Tammuz, Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, the 17th day of the Hebrew month of Tammuz, which is usually in June or July. Commemoration of the breach of Jerusalem walls by the Babylonians. Those of you who have ever either studied medieval history or watched films about castles and knights and all of these things know that first you line up all of your troops around the castle, demanding that they surrender. When they don't surrender, you begin to attack the walls, hoping to break through and to capture the city, the castle, whatever it is in that way. Well, the 10th of Tibet was when the siege began. The 17th of Tammuz, which as you can see is about 6 months later, is when the siege through into the wall of Jerusalem, allowing the army of the Babylonians to invade. But it is also considered to be, by our tradition, the same date, the 17th of Tammuz, on which the first tablets that were brought down from Mount Sinai, meaning the first tablets of the Ten Commandments, the moment that Moses was confronted with the sin of the golden calf and shattered the tablets at that time. This is also considered to be the day when the Seleucids burnt the first Torah scroll, which began the Maccabi revolt, our uprising against the Seleucid Empire, which was in control of our territory at that time. This was also the date when the idol was erected by the Seleucids in the Temple of Jerusalem. Again, another very dark day in Jewish history during that time period. As daylight fasts, meaning that we fast, and I'll talk about the details of how fasting works, but they are observed as fast days from sunup until the beginning of the Mariv service, meaning the evening time. There are some extenuating circumstances that can make it go into that, but I do want to just point out, especially during this health crisis, that for all of the Jewish fast days, whether it be these so-called minor fast days, meaning with a smaller degree of fasting, or whether it be a longer fast day like Tisha B'Av, or an extremely important fast day like Yom Kippur, all of these fast days should not be observed with fasting if a person is in a delicate medical condition. You should always consult your doctor for their best advice about whether or not it is safe or advisable for you to fast for any amount of time. Opinions on that particular topic, but know that Judaism says that if fasting is not appropriate for you, you are not impressing anyone, least of all God, by fasting against your doctor's orders. Judaism does not have that kind of machismo built into it. We don't endanger ourselves for the commandments. We let the commandments lift our lives, not risk our lives. So those are our first two. Any questions before I move on to the next in our calendar? So, in the line of the calendar, on the 9th of Av, which is usually in July and August, coming up in, what is it, about 2 weeks' time, we have a full 24-hour fast, meaning the fast begins with nightfall. Continue with our fast all the way through till nightfall of the next night. Reminder, of course, that all Jewish holidays are officially reckoned from the beginning of one night until the beginning of the next night. As a callback to the beginning of the book of Genesis, where it says, day one is reminding us that days begin with the evening. And if you think that's weird, just please remember that in Gregorian systems and secular calendars, the day begins at 12 o'clock midnight, which is also in the middle of the night, a time when people might actually be awake. So what does Tisha B'Av, the saddest, heaviest, most painful day in our Jewish calendar, commemorate? Well, most prominently, it is the day which is the anniversary of the destruction of both. First being destroyed by the Babylonians in 586, the second being destroyed by the Romans in the year 70 CE. So that is the primary focus and the primary pain that we carry when we commemorate these days. But unfortunately, day. According to our tradition, it was also the day on which it was decreed that the generation who left Egypt would not enter the land of Israel, meaning after the spies came back and gave a very negative report and the people listened. That is when God said, fine, then you won't, the next generation will. And so we commemorate that as well. It is also considered to be the day of the fall and massacre of Beitar. Beitar was the final the last major revolt against the Romans in the land of Israel. It is also the day when the Romans plowed the Temple Mount into desolation, reducing it not only to rubble, but removing all visible signs of the temple's presence. This is not by tradition, but actually by historical record, that it is the day upon which the First Crusade was declared by the Pope in 1095. Why is that a particularly sad day for Jews when ostensibly the Crusades were between? Because the Christians of Europe massacred tens of thousands of Jews in Europe and massacred many more Jews in the land of Israel. The Crusades were an equal opportunity murderous rampage, and that meant that we were also the date on which Jews were expelled from England in 1290. One of the first countries and one of the most enduring expulsions that happened in the European time. It was eventually rescinded only 400 years later. It is also the Inquisition and everything that went into creating the Anosim, the crypto Jews, as they are called, the people who lived in fear for their lives as they hid from the Inquisition, as the 1492 was the final day when they had to have left or stay at the risk of their life. When World War I began, they might be wondering again, why is World War I considered a dark day for the Jewish people? Well, apart from the fact that World War I is a dark day for all of humanity, World War I set in motion two of the greatest catastrophes that set in motion the rise towards fascism in Europe, and most importantly with Hitler in Germany, but it also set in motion the events that would lead to the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, which led to horrible repression against the many Jews who lived in the Soviet Union. World War I does have a special additional pain for us as Jews. It is also the day, yes, this list is long, for the removal of the Jews from the Warsaw Ghetto. The Warsaw Ghetto was in Poland, where many of the Nazis decided to liquidate the ghetto, meaning to remove the Jews from it and take them to a place where they could be slaughtered. And so that liquidation began on Tisha B'Av. It was also the date when, in 1994, Buenos Aires in Argentina, which killed about 100 people, and was perpetrated as a terrorist attack by the nation of Iran. So, Tisha B'Av is sad, right? There's something for everyone to be depressed about. The temples, it's there. If you are upset about our spiritual falling at the golden calf, it's there. If you are upset about our historical persecution, it is there. If you are upset about modern events in the 20th and 21st century of the right, there. Is a bundle of misery layered into one day over and over again throughout history. Now, our tradition asks, how is it that all of this could have happened on one day? It seems almost cruel that by different our tradition tells us this was an act of mercy by God rather than an act of mocking our pain. Rather than adding to our injury, which was unfortunately going to happen regardless because of the choices of people that were to misery upon other humans, rather than spreading all of those events throughout the calendar, creating new moments of pain and suffering for us to commemorate and a smattering throughout our year, instead they were bundled together. We would have one day to mourn intensely and the rest of the year to focus on the good that is in life. Any questions on the commemorative events, the events that are commemorated at Tisha B'Av? There are longer lists, I should point out, that you are welcome to go and find, but these are the most prominent events throughout our history. There we go. Gedalia, the fast of Gedalia. Usually this is in September, occasionally in very early October. It is the day after the second day of Rosh Hashanah. So having just celebrated the beginning of a new year, we are daylight fast. Gedalia was the last governor, the last vestige of Jewish sovereignty in Judah under Babylonian rule. So the Babylonians besieged Jerusalem. They entered Jerusalem, installed Gedalia as a caretaker puppet governor for the Jews in the land. Unfortunately, Jewish extremists decided that we should fight back against the Babylonians again. Understand, this was after we had already lost the horrible war that led up to Tisha B'Av. So this second wave of extremist action led to Jews killing another Jew. Done this, they decided that there was no point trying to keep us as a semi-autonomous nation within their empire, which is what we had been up until that point. What we would have been up until that point under Gedalia. And so instead, they began to exile Israel and completely stripping us of any form of sovereignty within the borders of our land. So this, you might say, sealed our fate. Actually, of course, we rose from the ashes of this destruction, returned, and we are still here. But this day still remains as one where we remember the pain of this final stamp upon the neck of the Jewish people by the Babylonians. Okay, so where do we know about these different fasts? How do we know that these are what we are fasting, or that we should be fasting at this time? Well, the prophets in the Tanakh. And when you read in Zechariah chapter 8, it says there is the fast of the 4th, the fast of the 5th, the fast of the 7th, and the fast of the 10th. Now, what does he mean by 4th, 5th, 7th, and 10th? He is talking about, although many people think of Rosh Hashanah as happening in the beginning of the year, at the first of the year, that is not correct. Rosh Hashanah is not the first month of the year. The first month of the year is the month of Nisan, which is the month where we celebrate Passover. So Rabbi Akiva will help us do. The fast of the 4th, this is the 9th of Tammuz, on which the city was breached. As it says in Jeremiah, on the 9th day of the 4th month, the famine was so severe in the city that there was no food for the people of the land. On which the house of our God, was burned. The fast of the 7th, this is the 3rd of Tishrei, on which Gedalia was killed. This teaches you, he says, that the death of the house of our God. It's just an amazing insight by Akiva there, that although Tisha B'Av is considered to be the worst day because of the calamities of the temples being destroyed, Som Gedalia is also considered to be a day of on that day, only one person was killed, but one person being killed is equal to the destruction of the temple as well. The fast of the 10th, this is the 10th of Tibbitt, on which the king of Babylonia laid siege to Jerusalem, as it says, on the 10th day of the month, Son of man, write down the name of this day, this very day. The king of Babylon has laid siege to Jerusalem this very day. Any questions on the Okay, so in addition to those formal days, there is also a period during this time that has its own customs of mourning. That is 9th of Av, which is coming up next week, in 2 weeks. This period is known as the 3 weeks because it is about 3 weeks long. And during that time, it is an Ashkenazic custom to prohibit marriages and cutting hair. Beard and I didn't cut them right before, so they're going to be a bit long until after the 9th of Av. From Rosh Chodesh Av, meaning from the beginning of Rosh Chodesh, which is next week, until Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of Av, the above prohibitions continue, and also like the fancy type of pressing that was done in the ancient world. No laundry done. Again, these were special types of washing that were not done as frequently or as casually as we do. No bathing for pleasure, and many do also have the custom of not eating meat. These are just ways that people would try to intensify their commemoration of this sad moment during which the city of Jerusalem was being assaulted after the breach had been made. So if you're ever planning a wedding, you always want to, and you don't want to get married during this time. It's one reason, by the way, why you don't find as many Jewish people getting married in the month of June. I know June brides are very common in many other cultures. It doesn't show up quite so often in Judaism. Right. How do we fast? Well, there are actually a number of different restrictions that all work together to create a unique feeling on these days. No eating, obvious. No drinking. No wearing of leather shoes. Leather shoes are always considered to be a sign. And so taking off leather shoes and wearing either synthetics or no shoes was considered to be a sign that would make a person more connected to their humility. No bathing or washing for pleasure. Right? We can still wash for hygiene. Doubly so during the COVID epidemic. Washing for hygiene should absolutely be adhered to during this time. No anointing for pleasure. Again, anointing was done in the ancient world for putting oils and ointments on a person to either beautify them by making their skin glow or to make them smell better. Nowadays, we are allowed to anoint for hygiene. If you have special ointments or lotions that are necessary, please keep using them. But it is not the best time for trying out your fancy perfume. Relations. On the days of mourning in particular, we do not engage in intimacy with our spouses. For those that are interested and maybe missed the class when I've talked about this in the past, now on Tisha B'Av itself, on the 9th day of Av, again coming up in 2 weeks, there are a few additional practices to try and emphasize the other. Normally you see someone and you say, hey, how you doing? What's up? How's things going okay with you? And all of that. That is not done on Tisha B'Av. When you see someone else, you can acknowledge them, but asking very much like asking someone at a funeral, how are you doing? It is not the appropriate question and shows a lack of sensitivity. And since we are all mourners, then of course that means that all of us refrain from those types of greetings. It is also a practice to sit on the floor. They're sitting during the day. Others will sit on the floor during the services, which include the reading of the book of Eicha, the book of Lamentations. In the morning service, we also refrain from wearing tefillin. Or the talit gadol, the large prayer shawl that we wear. If you wear the smaller talit, the arba kanfot, the talit katan, then that can be worn. But the larger talit and the tefillin are considered to be letting ourselves feel the pain of distance between us and God. We do not wear those in our morning service, but we do wear them for the afternoon service. We also refrain from our normal Torah study. The day of mourning. We can read from Job, which is a very reflective work. We can read from the book of Eicha, Lamentations, of course, and there are selections from the book of Jeremiah, who was the prophet that warned us most. And so his warnings are considered to be appropriate material. And in fact, we read heavily from him during this time leading up to Tisha B'Av as well. And there's a YouTube comment. What is the book of Eicha? Common name, yes. As I mentioned, the book of Eicha is known as Lamentations in English. Appropriately enough, as this is not a day of rejoicing and relaxing, actions of work are still permitted on Tisha B'Av. It's not considered a very auspicious day, but if you need to do work, it is permitted on that day, unlike Shabbat or the major festival holidays. Other ways that we remember and all these other issues that we do throughout the year. It is customary to leave 1 cubit of space, that's about 18 inches or so, unpainted opposite the doorway of a home. This is to show a little bit is left undone. Life is not perfect and complete because we are still living in a fractured world. There are some authorities who prohibit ornate wall decoration of any type, most famously Rambam, but most authorities do not object to this, which is why you will see paintings and other types of decoration in most Jewish homes. It's customary in some communities to leave a place empty at any table that when you are inviting guests over to show the lack of presence of our people. Some people will also leave jewelry sets incomplete, missing a piece or a string, meaning having one stone out of an earring. Some have the custom of putting ashes on the forehead of a groom before the wedding. Some authorities in the past prohibited music and song of all types. Almost all communities do not follow that particular ruling in the modern world. We have recognized that music and song may not all be frivolous because it can absolutely raise the spirit. It is also customary in the ancient world to tear one's clothes when seeing Jerusalem in her desolation. The city of Jerusalem now, it is not Jerusalem completely rebuilt, meaning it is not fully at peace and it does not have a complete restoration of what was destroyed in the past. On the other hand, it is a Jewish city. And it is much of its history, despite the tensions of violence, it is a relatively peaceful city. And therefore, opinions are divided about whether or not renting garments in the current situation. I will admit on my side that I am of the opinion that to tear our clothes at the site of Jerusalem, especially since 1967, would be to disregard the miracle that is the modern state of Israel, and to also trying to protect and keep the city unified. And so I personally would not tear my clothes at the site of Jerusalem. So, the question that's probably been lurking in the back of your minds, and if not, it should have been, is why was the temple destroyed? And the rabbis had a lot to say about this. I'm going to try and bring just a few instances of how they felt about this issue, but there is much more that we could be discussing as well. Why was the first temple destroyed? Because of three evils in it: idolatry, immorality, and bloodshed. And if you are somebody who is familiar with your Tanakh, with your Bible, and you have read through the different prophets that led up towards the destruction, Jeremiah, the other prophets such as Amos and Hosea and the rest, you will know that these three were very much topics of constant conversation and admonition. God was very much not pleased with the behavior of the nation, and these three were the three outstanding on a routine basis. But the second temple, well, the second temple did not actually work like that, right? But why was the second temple destroyed? Seeing that during the time it stood, people occupied themselves with the Torah, observance of mitzvot, behaved much better during the time of the Second Temple. And this does seem to have been borne out by historical research and by archaeology. One that we can measure very easily in terms of idolatry is that before you will find idols across the country before the destruction of the First Temple. But after the destruction of the First Temple, with the restoration and the return of the Jews from the exile in Babylon, you no longer find idols as being immorality and bloodshed don't leave an archaeological record. At least the ones we can measure, the idolatry does seem to have been mostly vanquished before the Second Temple period. So we are left wondering, why was the Second Temple destroyed? Baseless hatred, what is known as sinat chinam, prevailed. This is to teach you that sinat chinam is deemed as grave as all the three sins of idolatry, immorality, and bloodshed together. One of the amazing lessons that the rabbis drew from the time of the Second was that the violence, the sectarian rivalry of different Jewish groups is the cause that ultimately led to the Roman destruction of our people. Because of the zealots of different factions, because of the anger and the hatred that was expressed between just individual Jews, our country essentially rotted itself from the inside. And so sinat chinam as a destructive force is every bit as powerful. Unfortunately, it's also much harder to stop. We are much better at reduced immorality and bloodshed, and as I mentioned, idolatry. Toning down our baseless hatred, that's but the entire global population is still very much struggling with this baseless hatred addiction. So the question then comes, how do we commemorate? I mentioned the actual law of what we observe now, but it's important to recognize that that law had to progress, that in the immediate aftermath of the destructions, people were struggling to find ways to commemorate the disaster that had been befallen them. Indeed, we see this historically in any time there years before people could begin to fully understand and commemorate the destruction. After 9/11, we had a very similar process as well in this country. And so it is not surprising that during the days after the temple, there were these issues as well. The rabbis taught, when the Second Temple was destroyed, many of Israel stopped eating meat and drinking wine. Eating meat and drinking wine are considered signs of joy. Rabbi Joshua said to them, "My children, why do you not eat meat and drink wine? Of which sacrifices were brought, or drink wine which was offered at the altar." Right? Their argument is the temple was destroyed the place where we would bring these in our greatest moments of exaltation, of joy and excitement and spiritual uplift. Now, every drop of wine now reminds me of what we have lost. So I can't eat these anymore. Rabbi Joshua said to them, if so, let us not eat bread, as a meal offering is also gone. So he said, well, that's logical, but that means we also because that too we can live on fruit, they replied. So they said, okay, fine, we'll cut out bread. But was there not also the first fruit offering? Okay, then let us cease the use of fruit. And was it not also the custom to put water on the altar? Very special water sacrifice done during the time of Sukkot. And so what he is basically saying to them, backing them into the corner, is that if you are going to stop all the aspects of your life that were associated with the temple, then you are stopping life itself. And yes, it may be painful to have it now gone, but if you remove all the reminders of that pain and its absence, then you are removing yourself from life itself. And therefore, that is too much. How much is it? Then said Rabbi Joshua to them, my children, come and listen. It would be wrong not to mourn at all, because the evil decree is executed, right? It did happen. It is painful. Of course, we have to mourn. But to mourn too much is impossible. They could not stand. A very important principle in Jewish law, that when the rabbis were putting into place practices and rulings, it had to be a ruling that was humanly able to be followed. And therefore, morning, one may prepare all that he needs for his meal, leaving out some little thing as a sign of mourning. And the same is the case with a woman. She may dress with all her ornaments, leaving out some of the unimportant for that purpose. Again, a little bit undone, a little bit here, not removing ourselves from all of life's joy. Rabbi Ishmael Bar Elisha said, from that day, when the temple was destroyed, it would only be right we should take upon ourselves not to eat meat and not to drink wine, but such a thing, which the majority of the congregation must not in Bava Batra. So Judaism has taught us much. We've had too many opportunities to learn about how to commemorate tragedy and how to commemorate pain. It is not to embrace it completely and to lose ourselves in it. And it's not to the pain that occurred. It is to find a way to keep it as a reminder without allowing it to become the dominant theme of life. Any questions on this up till this point? Okay, so we're going to sort of finish off by asking ourselves, okay.
Hey, Rabbi.
It was a very hold on, someone's trying to talk, and I'm trying to see who it is because right now it's coming through. The quality is very, very bad. Who's trying to talk? And I'll see if I can improve the quality of it. Oh, I've got a chat. There we go. Chat is usually, my connection is really bad too. I hope you can hear me. But whoever is trying to ask a question, if you'd like to type it into the Zoom group chat, maybe that will make it easier for me to answer. Continue talking. If you get around to typing it, I will catch it as soon as it shows up on my screen. So the question then becomes, how long do we continue mourning? How long do we continue feeling miserable over these events? Quite recent. Not all of them are 2,000 years old. But even still, is there no end? Well, again, we turn back to Zechariah, and I apologize for cheating, but originally I only gave you the first half of the quote because I didn't want to distract you. But we're now going to get his full quote. This is the Lord of hosts came to me saying, thus said the Lord of hosts, the fast of the 4th month, meaning the 17th of Tammuz, and the fast of the 5th, Tisha B'Av, and the fast of the 7th, the 3rd of Tishrei, and gladness and cheerful feasts. Therefore, love the truth and peace. So what Zechariah is saying is that eventually, in his vision of a future time, these days of mourning will be transformed into days of rejoicing. But it does tell us that eventually it will change, that these days will become days of celebration. So we continue to ask the question then, when will that happen? Well, the Talmud again gives us an opinion. What is the meaning of that which is written in Zechariah? God called them fasts, and he called them joy and gladness. In times of peace, they shall be joy and gladness. If there is no peace, fast. Our business says that this is a binary form. Right? If it is a time where there is peace, then this is joy and gladness. But if peace is taken away or peace has not broken out, then these are called fasts. Said Rav Papa, who wants to clarify this a little, the government, meaning attacks against us fasts, if there are no decrees by the government, but also not peace, those who wish fast, and those who wish do not fast. So Rav Papa is proposing that it is a little bit more or no peace. He says, look, when I look around at my world, there are times when we have peace, where things are completely at rest, when there is a harmony and blessing to the world and all is as it should be. We haven't really had a whole lot of those, but it is possible. And there are times when the government is pursuing and aggressively trying to stamp out and harm the Jewish people. And then there are times when it is neither. When it is neither peaceful in any meaningful description of the word, nor is it a time when fast. And if you don't want to fast, don't fast. However, there is an objection. There's a question over here I just want to check. All right, so there's a question from Israel and the other nations that caused other nations to invade. So that's very much something I cover in my class on anti-Semitism, of what is it about the Jewish people that makes so many other people around the world crazy about us. So I'm going to leave that on for a moment. That it is their problem, not ours. It's our problem in terms of we get the short end of the stick, but it is their problem, meaning that we're the ones who generate the hate and anger. But second,
right.
Anti-Semitism video, I go into much more detail on that. So there's a challenge to Rav Papa, where someone says, well, if that's the case, then the 9th of Av, Tisha B'Av also, we should ignore. Right? We can treat it as what we want. If it's an in-between time, we should turn it into joy. But Rav Papa and the other rabbis do not treat Tisha B'Av as being of the same caliber as the other days that we've discussed. They believe that it should continue as a day of commemoration and fast until the days of the Messiah. The case of the 9th of Av is different since many misfortunes occurred on that date. Right? It is not enough to simply say that Jerusalem was restored from the day that Jerusalem was destroyed. There are other things that are, we saw that have happened upon until the days of Mashiach, Bimhera v'yameinu, may it happen quickly in our day. Until those times, then Tisha B'Av will continue to be commemorated. Now, this debate is a very active one, and there are many people who do say that in the modern world, with Israel restored to its own independence, that for the minor fast days, for the other days apart from Tisha B'Av, if you wish to fast, by all means fast. If you wish not to fast, in recognition of us living in a time when we have greater freedom from persecution for Jews in many parts of the world, then if you wish not to fast, you are absolutely permitted not to fast in recognition of our special time in history. And that brings us to our conclusion for today. Any other questions, either through the YouTube chat, through the Zoom chat, or if the audio quality is okay, through the Zoom voice? Just checking the YouTube chat, letting them catch up to us. We will wrap it up here, and I will see you all next Thursday, again at 6 o'clock. A reminder that you can watch the Shabbat services on our live stream feed through our Temple Israel website, tiflorida.org. Friday nights beginning at 7:30, Saturday morning beginning at 9:30. Which if you need the Zoom link for, please email me and I'll be happy to send you the Zoom link for our Sunday morning minyan at 9 a.m.
Take care, Rabbi.
All right, everyone, be well, take care, stay safe, stay healthy.
Thank you.